All right, Michael, welcome back for another episode of the Look Good, Move Well podcast. We're going to go deeper into fitness today, actual training. You have a wealth of training experience. You've been training for just over 20 years now, consistently. And you've been through a lot of different methods, modalities, competitive ventures in your fitness. You have built a great amount of strength, a great physique, great conditioning. You've had highs and lows along the way. I know a bit about your journey. I want to hear a little bit more about it today, but I want to really touch on your experience in CrossFit, functional bodybuilding, your current excitement and enthusiasm for high rocks training, and then also the setbacks that you've had along the way, because you have dealt with some small injuries here and there, but big ones as well, that have changed the direction that you've taken with your fitness. And I think people will resonate with some aspects of that journey. And there's a lot of lessons in there as well. For somebody who has built so much of your identity, your sobriety, your habits around movement, and to be sidelined by injuries along the way, I'm curious to dive into how that's impacted you. But before we jump into that, tell the people what we did today for our training. And is that something you've done recently?
So today for training, we did pretty much a push-pull day. Mm-hmm. And I loved it, by the way. It was super fun. We did a 16-minute EMOM to kick it off with incline dumbbell bench press. Pretty much slow and steady, nice and controlled. 6 to 8 reps, moderately heavy weight. Mm-hmm. Right into, I did seated rows.
Yep.
And you did chest supported rows. Mm-hmm. And then after that EMOM, we went into, what did we do right after that?
The tricep mashup.
Oh,
dips.
We did the tricep mash. So we did slow and steady dips to max, right into tricep push-ups on a raised bar to max, rest about 3 minutes. And then we did that for 3 sets. Mm-hmm. And then we did incline dumbbell hammer curls into one arm pull downs. Yep. One arm lat pull downs. And we did that for 3 or 4 sets. And then we finished up with 2 maxed out reps of lateral raises. I love that kind of training. I really love that kind of training. It was a full-blown puff 'em up upper body blaster.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, it was just
full body puff 'em up, baby.
It was a big boy puff up sesh. And I loved it. I love training. Look, at the end of the day for me, I think really, I love moving weight. Yeah. I just love moving weight around. I love moving weight around. And, you know, my journey really started in going back to my story. That guy, Marcus, was a martial artist. He was a Muay Thai kickboxer. And so my journey started in conditioning and Muay Thai.
Okay.
And so, you know, he told me that he wanted me to put on a pair of sneakers and go out for a walk. And then hopefully that walk would turn to a run eventually. So I really started my mornings every single morning with a run in the beginning of my fitness journey. And so I would run every single morning, and, you know, that it would be, you know, it started as a walk and then it graduated to a run, and that run was 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. I never really ran more than like 3 or 4 miles in the morning. Once I had a cadence for running every morning. But I was always at 12 o'clock every day. I trained Muay Thai from 12 to 2.
Okay.
And I became like incredibly passionate about Muay Thai kickboxing.
Yeah.
Traveled out to Thailand a number of times to train, to fight. I just loved it. I loved it. So for a good, strong, probably 8 to 10 years of my life, from 23 to 32-ish or so, it was really in Muay Thai and running. A little kettlebells, a lot of calisthenics, a lot of push-ups, a lot of pull-ups, a lot of dips. You know, I did
a lot of taking bamboo and smacking your shins with it.
So funny that people think that that's a thing, but there was not that. There were some people that would roll out their shins. I never got like super deep into the fighting game, you know, like for me, it was like going down to nationals or doing a smoker at my gym. For me, really, Muay Thai was very, very much about the discipline.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's cool, right? Like in CrossFit, I kind of can compare it to CrossFit, Muay Thai, in the sense that like every time you get better at something, it feels really good.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I remember in Muay Thai, you know, skipping, jump roping is a big thing in Muay Thai for conditioning. However, they don't skip with speed ropes or regular ropes. They skip with like garden hoses. It's literally it's a very heavy, thick rope that you skip with, and it's a slow skip, but it's hard as hell. And every time, you know, when learning how to skip in general is not easy for a lot of people, right? It's a timing thing. It's hard. Learning how to skip with a big heavy rope is insanely painful because every time that thing hits your toe, it sucks. So I remember I was so frustrated because I just could not get the skipping thing down, and I wanted to skip so bad. I wanted to learn how to skip so bad. So I really did it. I did it for half an hour every day. And at this point I was locked in to this commitment stuff.
Yeah.
And then I remember coming into the gym one day, like not like saying, okay, today's the day. Like I just like picked up the rope, and for whatever reason, I just went, and it just clicked.
Nice.
And I was like, I got the rhythm. Holy smokes, I got the rhythm. Wait, I can do this. I'm doing this now. And that was it. And from that day forward, I became like a great skipper. And and you know, similarly in CrossFit, you know, Olympic lifting is one of the most challenging things I've ever attempted. It's so technical, and there's so many cues that you need to be mindful of. And if your ego gets involved and you put too much weight on the bar, like you're never going to get it. Even though it doesn't matter how much experience you have with weight training, or, you know, like if you're attempting to learn how to Olympic lift from scratch with anything more than really, I think it, you know, to be fair, like a dime on each side of the bar, like if you're trying to go any more than that and you're really learning from scratch, like you're just not going to get it. And I struggled there so much. I wanted to put more weight on the thing. I wanted to power clean like 185 pounds, like that. Because I was like, I'm strong. And, you know, my coach was like, he's like, I'm not going to fight with you. But I'm just here to tell you that, like, you need to start with the bar. Yeah. The bar alone. And if you can't wrap your head around that, like, I'm sorry. But like, so I just remember, and I was like, fine. And I did it. And slowly but surely, I got better at it. And I remember one moment where I had, it was a 95 pound bar. And I was like, I couldn't understand that moment of grace where the bar kind of stops and floats and you kind of get underneath it. I struggled there because I couldn't get under the bar fast enough. And then I got it. And it was like a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
I mean, that's the job of a fitness professional, a fitness coach, is to essentially, or any coach in martial arts, is, you know, give the student the right skill level or next step that they can have that aha moment with practice. If you give them something too hard, they actually won't ever get there because it's beyond their skill level, and they'd have to skip 5 steps to get to that. And you can't skip steps in fitness. So it's just being able to recognize that. And it's always easier to make things harder for a client. It's very difficult to say, hey, you're not doing that well enough. Let me bring you all the way back to zero. And I've learned that lesson the hard way a lot of times with clients where I got too ambitious. I was like, hey, you can do this. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry, you can't do that. Let's go down here. And there's really, it's a very delicate situation to preserve someone's ego or preserve their, you know, their self-confidence to bring them back down. So, yeah, definitely want to say, hey, let's just start with the bar, because that's how we all start. We all got to learn, you know, it's like, and then let's gradually progress from there. But you said that you love moving weight, and you just then talked about 10 years of your life being basically not moving weight. So how did that happen?
So basically, so it was really a combination in those days, that first 10 years of becoming really passionate about martial art and getting my ass kicked on a regular basis. And I think there was something that I really enjoyed about that, because what I learned about myself in that journey was that it didn't matter how hard I got hit, I always got back up. And that for me was a metaphor for my life. And I hold that very close to who I am today, is this idea that like, I am always going to get back up, no matter how hard it hurts, no matter how bad it's been, I am going to get back up. And I think that is kind of like a little secret that, you know, like, you can fail 100 times. If you get back up 101, you're right back in the game. You know. Yeah. So I did. You know, a lot of Muay Thai, calisthenics, and running. Eventually, I was thinking about stepping into jiu-jitsu, because a lot of the Muay Thai guys were also doing jiu-jitsu. So I started rolling jiu-jitsu, and once I got to the jiu-jitsu gym, all the guys that were doing jiu-jitsu were lifting weights, because it was like, it wasn't about being like, there's a strength component to jiu-jitsu that's very different than Muay Thai. Muay Thai is like, you don't want any extra on you. You want to be super small up top and have some leg strength, but you want to be as fast and as lightning fast as you can up top. And so the guys in jiu-jitsu were all lifting weights. So I was like, all right, well, I'll roll jiu-jitsu and I'll start lifting weights. No idea what I was doing. Yeah. I had kettlebell experience, but, you know, no strength training. And I remember it was one morning, I was at the local, whatever cheap gym it was, and I was deadlifting, and I probably had 135 pounds on the bar, and I had no guidance, no form, no nothing. And I just heard a pop, and I was like, ooh, that did not feel good. But I was able to kind of walk it off. But it just kind of was like, and I had never had like, I mean, I had a ton of, I had knee surgeries from Muay Thai and running. I had, you know, always busted wrists and, you know, injuries that were fixable, rolled ankle, things like that.
Sure.
I had never really had like a severe injury. Broken nose surgeries. I had 2 reconstructive nose surgeries, but nothing like catastrophic. I heard that pop and I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. Anyway, that night I went to go roll, and I was rolling with this big dude, and my foot got caught in his gi when he was trying to pass my guard, and he dropped all of his weight on me and basically completely stacked me. And the pop that I heard was like super audible. Yeah. People were like, ooh. I screamed. It was insanely painful. And that was the beginning of my back injury, which was a ruptured L4, L5 disc. In the MRI, you can kind of just see the fragment of disc that was just sitting on my sciatic nerve. And for 8 weeks of my life, it was just god awful. You know, it was, am I ever going to be able to, like, what am I going to do? Like, all the doctors that I had seen, and I had seen a number of them, were telling me that I needed to open up my back. They need to get that fragmented disc off the nerve because it could shift into your spinal column, and that could be really bad. But I was 30 years old, or 31, I think. And I was like, I'm not doing back surgery right now. Like, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to exhaust all other options. So I went to witch doctors. I went to Zen, Qigong guys. I did everything. I went to I have an experience with this sort of really interesting style of chiropractic work where they barely touch your body. It's a very weird thing, but it actually was like very helpful for me. Ultimately, I had another MRI after 8 weeks of doing this stuff, and the doctor that reviewed the MRI was like, you know what, let's try to do a cortisone shot, because they thought that the cortisone shot wasn't going to do anything for me with that fragment on the nerve.
Yeah,
like it wouldn't. There was nothing they can do, really. They were like, we got to get in there and get it out. And so I walked into this, to the whatever anesthesiologist or whoever administers that pain medicine. And I walked in there, 45 degrees, could not stand up. I hadn't been able to stand up straight in 8 weeks. It was just really, really painful and awful. And this guy stuck a needle in my back. And it was like, once he hit the spot, it was like opening up a can of Coca-Cola, man. It was like my whole entire back just opened up. Wow. And I flattened out. I had a couple of pillows under my stomach because that's how I had to sleep every single night, a stack of pillows under my hips. And I walked out of there. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was like a death sentence to an athlete, you know? And then after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to commit to something that's going to help me build strength in my lower back. And so I literally did a full year of Ashtanga yoga, and then slowly started getting back into fitness. And it really started to look like slowly getting back into running. And I was doing some more kind of like, I guess you would call it functional training. I did not go right back into the weights for sure. And I was afraid to do jujitsu. So this is probably around 2014, 2015. And I kind of I stepped away from like the thought of like competing in sport for that. I was just too close to that bad injury. But I started doing some long distance running. And in 2008, I ran my first marathon. I started doing a couple of half marathons, and then I said, all right, I'm gonna gun for a marathon and see if I can do another marathon. And then I ran the New York City Marathon. And when I was done with that, a friend of mine had said, hey, have you ever thought about bodybuilding? Mm-hmm. And I was like, bodybuilding? I was like, I'm like 155 pounds. Like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, you kind of have like the frame for it. Like, you should think about trying to do some men's physique bodybuilding. She was a bikini bodybuilder. So like that night I went home and I kind of like started looking at it, and I hired a coach and I just went for it. And, you know, I was so regimented with the way I ate at that point, when it was typically pretty much like eating for...
Yeah, you were already on the chicken and broccoli and oatmeal. You're set.
Right.
Just get some muscle on this guy.
Yeah. So what it was basically like increasing my caloric intake like immensely, right? Because I was pretty thin and you know, pretty lean, but I was a thin dude, you know. Yeah. And so I hired this coach, and I told him I want to compete in a bodybuilding show in a year. Like, what do we got to do? And so he fed the crap out of me for around 7 months, 8 months, and had me doing, you know, basically push-pull leg workouts that I fell in love with, man.
How did you guys navigate the back stuff, and where was that? And
slow and steady.
Yeah.
Slow and steady.
Did he have you doing big compound lifts and things like that? Or
No, not in the beginning. I told him that I'd had back stuff. So instead of going heavy squat, like he would do things like, you know, we would do heavy leg press, a lot of heavy leg press. So we, so he would, you know, instead of heavy squats, you know, we did a lot of leg pressing, a lot of walking lunges, things like that. And then slowly he would ask me how I was feeling with squatting. And, you know, I slowly started to squat and slowly started to deadlift again. And honestly, like before I knew it, I was squatting heavy and I was deadlifting heavy and my back felt pretty good. I mean, I would have little things show up here and there, little tweaks here and there, but at the end,
it never derailed your training for bodybuilding.
No, I mean, there were moments in time where it like it would show up and I would be like, oh damn, my back, but no, not really.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of that year, I did my first show, and it was in LA, and I like loved every minute of it. I was like, you know, it's so funny to compete that way. It's very different than competing in like martial arts, right? Or like in a running race, right? Like you're really, the competition is like, it lasts 4 months because you're in a deep cut for 4 to 5 months, and it's all about what you look like. And, you know, I was like, I mean, there's definitely stress that goes along with being in a severe caloric deficit, but you also are, like mentally, I'm like, man, like I look fucking good, dude. This is like, I'm like, I didn't know I was capable of this, you know?
Yeah.
And so I went on this 4-ish year journey with it, and I competed in 5 or 6 shows. I ended up getting my pro card. I competed as a pro. And after that last pro comp in 2022, I was like, all right, I'm done with this. You know, like I did it. It was fun. I said I wanted to get my pro card. I got my pro card. I did it naturally. I didn't use any drugs. And what's next? And of course, the natural progression is CrossFit, right? Like, of course.
There's a lot of people jumped into that game.
Yeah. So Creatures of Habit, you know, I launched Creatures of Habit, I launched it in 2021. We saw very quickly that the CrossFit community like loved Creatures of Habit, loved Meal One. They loved the product. A lot of CrossFitters using it. And so my team was basically like, I had told everybody, I was like, yeah, I'm probably done with bodybuilding for a while. Like, they were like, Michael, you need to go do CrossFit.
Yeah.
Like your whole, like 50% of our customers are CrossFitters, CrossFit athletes. So I was like, okay. Next day, showed up to the closest CrossFit gym, walked in. Interestingly enough, the owner and the coach, the main coach of that CrossFit gym, Sean, is like a massive fan of yours.
Oh,
mega. And I didn't know that obviously when I walked in there, but I saw him recently, and I was like, yeah, you know, Marcus, Philly, and I have become good friends. And he's like, oh my God, that guy is like my idol. He's like, for 10 years, I've been just like,
let's get Sean out here. Yeah. Come on, Sean, let's go.
He's a great guy. And so I went in there and I went in guns blazing. He is a very, very methodical coach, Sean. You know, like when I walked in there, I had no idea what the community of CrossFit was all about. But like when I walked into his gym, I walked in and I was like, all right, I'm ready to train. And he was like, slow down, partner. He was like, you're not training today. He's like, you're going to sit with me for 20 minutes. We're going to have a conversation. And then I'm going to have you fill out this whole thing. And then you're going to come back when we schedule a time, and we're going to talk about who you are. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, like, he was like very straightforward. He's like, this isn't a regular 24-hour fitness, man. He's like, I love everybody who works out here, and I want to make sure that you're the right fit for this place. And I was like, okay. And at that point I had, you know, bleached blonde, shaved head hair. You know, I probably could have come off as like coming off this bodybuilding, you know.
Yeah.
And so we sat, and I came back the next day or the following day, and I met with him for an hour and a half. We talked about my life, his life.
Yeah.
And he was like, dude, I think you'd be a great fit. So I went in and I just started to learn, and I fell in love with CrossFit. Of course I did, right? I fell in love with it. Yeah. It was a new sport. I was learning all sorts of new things.
God, those first few years are just, they were special.
Oh man, I was learning so much.
Before you knew anything, it was exciting. And then it gets hard when you start to learn, like, oh, I have to be good at this. Oh, I have to be good at that. Oh, I got to get better at this. I got to get better at that. That can get exhausting, but those first, like, those honeymoon years of CrossFit.
Wow, dude, I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. And he was a great coach. And I sometimes would be frustrated with him because he was not trying to fuel my sort of ambitious inexperience, because he knew very quickly that if it was up to me, I would have just put as much weight on as I could. And he was like, hey man, like a lot of people get hurt here, but not in this gym. So like, and then we had the conversation, because I got to a point where I was about a year in. I'd gotten pretty good. My body adapted. Like I was like a monster, literally. If I even compared to today, like looking at pictures of me after that first year of doing CrossFit 5 days a week, I was jacked and just beefy, because I was eating a lot more, because there was no way I can do what I was doing without eating a lot. And I ended up like rising to like pretty much the top of the gym in the classes that I was in. Yep. And I was finishing first, and and so I asked him, I was like, man, like, gosh, I want to get better. I want to get better. Like, who can I train with to get better? Because at that point I had said, I'm going to the Masters. Like that's the thought I had in my mind. And he literally said, look, dude, there's another CrossFit gym half a mile from here. You can go there and compete, and potentially there's some other members in that gym that you're gonna want to chase that are better. But like, if you don't want to go at my pace here, you can go there. And it might be better for you, but just know that like you run the risk of getting hurt. Like if you increase your capacity now before you're ready for it, and you have a back injury. Anyway, I did that. I decided that I wanted to go to the other gym, and I did, and I continued my path. And the coach over there was an amazing guy, amazing coach. And he like knew what my goal was, and he wanted to help me get there. And I was getting better at Oli lifting. And so I started putting on more weight, and he was like, it's a lot for where you're at, but I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. You got to do what you want to do. And so I felt my left shoulder, like really go one day. And it was a snatch to chest to bars back to back. And it was like 10 snatches with like 135 pounds to 10 chest to bars. And I felt my shoulder go in a snatch, and then I went up for the chest to bars, and I felt my shoulder completely felt like it just like ripped in half. So that was my first real injury in CrossFit. Yeah. And that set me back. And then I kind of like came back from that. I was in PT, and I was not doing any sort of kipping movements, and I was not putting anything over my head. But then we had like a heavy block, and I was PRing on a deadlift, and I felt my back go like really bad for the first time in a long ass time. Like it was like that thing went. And so I said, oh, that's it. I'm not playing around with this. Like, I'm just gonna sit on the Concept 2 bike for the next 2 weeks. Yeah. Just to get my conditioning in, let my body heal, shoulder, back, like let it all go. Yeah. And I was on the Concept 2, and I would sit on it for like 45 minutes, nothing crazy. Like I did that in 5 days. And then on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, I woke up complete sciatica back to where I was, whatever that was, 2010 or 12 or whatever it was that injury happened. And I couldn't walk, and it was devastating. And it was, I had to figure, I just couldn't believe that I did it again. Like I just could not believe that I had done this again to myself.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of guilt there.
Yeah.
which I know a lot of people go through when they get injured. It's like, you did something wrong to yourself. I can't be trusted. Just the whole shame spiral of that, which has to be overcome to get back moving again, and to trust yourself that, hey, I can go and move again and not put myself in this really risky position. And because movement is ultimately what healed you and what got you back to feeling as strong and as healthy as you were. And you got to go back to doing it again. And now there's this doubt. It's like, oh shit, I just hurt myself again. I can't be trusted. I pushed too hard, or, start to take on a lot of blame.
Yeah. It sucked. And that was like in June, 2 Junes ago. For about 4 or 5 weeks, I did the same thing that I did the last time that it happened. When it initially happened, I was seeing all sorts of doctors and got MRI, whatever. Ultimately, right before my wife and I, we always go to Europe for like 3 or 4. They go for 4 weeks. I tend to go for 2 to 3 weeks with her family in Europe. Literally right before that trip, I was able to get an appointment for a cortisone shot in my back, got the cortisone shot, and a couple of days later, I was okay. Mm-hmm. And on that trip, I was like, I'm not going to train. I'm going to just just going to walk with the family. That's all I'm going to do. And that's when I found functional bodybuilding.
Really?
Yeah.
That was the truth.
Yeah. So I've been following you, but I also, I didn't know enough about what you were doing.
Okay.
But I knew that I knew that there was no chance I was going to go right back to CrossFit at the capacity that I was.
Right.
I knew that I didn't want to just do bodybuilding again, because I enjoy being athletic, more athletic than just lifting weights.
Sure.
And I don't know if it was like I just was like scrolling through something and you showed up, but I knew I started looking into functional bodybuilding and how you had taken sort of your favorite things from CrossFit and your favorite things from bodybuilding and mashed them up in a way to keep people healthy, moving, but looking good. Because I think the difference between, there's no doubt, and I got no shame in it, I want to look good, right? Like especially as I age, I'm 44, and I want to continue looking. I mean, I pretty much look the same now as I did when I was 24 after I got sober, in terms of like my physique. I mean, I've been able to keep this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And when I started doing CrossFit, I just bulked up like a lot. Like I was like thick, and my clothes didn't fit me. My wife was like, dude, you're looking a little thick. Thick boy.
I know the thickness. I know the CrossFit thickness. I've been there.
Yeah. And, and so I was like, what can I do? Like, I want to continue doing these things. I want to continue doing these movements, but I also want to look good, and I also want to be athletic. So anyway, I just started looking into your stuff, and that's when I think I sent you a bunch of product, and that was right there it was like that August, September of a little over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago, and sent you a bunch of product. I DM'd you. I was like, dude, and and that's when I started doing functional bodybuilding. And I got to say, unless you push it to the max, I don't think you're going to get injured doing it. I don't think you're going to get injured doing it. And I loved the way you've mixed, the way you program in there keeps it really exciting and keeps it fun. Like, there are movements. I've been doing this for 20 years, and then I'd pull up a day I loved pump lift and persist. What was I toggle back and forth between.
You did some perform, you did some pump condition and some pump lift.
Pump condition and pump lift. Those are the two programs that I love to kind of toggle back and forth on. And there'd be some days there's a movement that I've never done, but I've never even seen before. That or super challenging. that were stimulating and activating, muscles that I just hadn't really done much with, you know? So it was really exciting. And I did that for probably about 9 months or so. Felt great. And then somebody said, "Hey, have you ever done a high rocks?" And I was like, "I've heard of high rocks, but no, I've never done one." And of course, you had
to give it. You had to dip your toe, baby. Got to do it.
Someone says, well, there's a high rocks coming to New York in a couple of months. Like,
let's get after it.
You should do it. And then I actually called up Marcus. I was like, "Yeah, man, I'm going to do this high rocks." He's like, "Dude, you got to fucking find something to stick with it for a little bit of time. You got to figure it out." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this high rocks and just see like what it's all about." And the truth is that, I think the beauty of that sport is anybody can do it. It's not
accessible. It's very accessible.
It's not like there's not a lot of skill.
It's not like the CrossFit Open and regionals. It's not. Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, it's really any kind of race or any kind of competition is going to be intimidating, no matter how you slice it, right? So showing up to an event to compete against a clock or compete against somebody else takes a level of courage.
It does.
To do that.
Certainly.
But the cool thing about that sport, I think, is that it doesn't require an enormous amount of skill.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and you had the functional fitness background. You've got a running background, and you are certainly somebody, just hearing your story, it's like you like a challenge, you like something new. I've learned that just in the 16, 18 months that I've known you, as you've kind of, even during the time that I've known you, you signed up for the CrossFit Open, you did that again, you had a recurrence of your back injury on that day you were warming up with the burpees. You've kind of bounced between a couple tracks and persist. You've tried, other training splits, and then got into some like running.
Yeah.
So I'm a huge proponent of people having adventures with their movement and their fitness. I think it's what keeps, that's why we're here. It's like, explore what keeps you excited and having fun.
Yeah.
And then at the base of that movement exploration, I believe there has to be a foundation of consistent practice around the fundamentals, which is really where we point a lot of people with our 3 times per week pump lift or pump condition. It's like, hey, make this your foundation. 3 times a week of this, and then go play with the other stuff. But if you play too much and you get too pulled in these different directions, you start to neglect things that just require time. You have to have hinging, strength and endurance. You need to have single leg, upper body push and pull. You need to balance these movement patterns out so that you've got this really stable foundation to go and play all the stuff and stay safe. And so that's, you mentioned high rocks, you mentioned getting into this like sort of hybrid athlete training. We're launching the hybrid athlete program next week, and it's 3 days of foundational lifting with 2 days of running. And so it kind of, it checks that box for me. It's like, okay, if I want somebody to go out and explore doing this, how can we build a good foundation of strength on over 3 days a week of full body lifting, and then give them a runway to build up to, we have it programmed to build up to a half marathon distance over 12 weeks, which is not unreasonable. It's like if you sign up for a half marathon, 12 weeks of training, even if it's just 2 days of running a week that are focused, that can get people a lot of skill work and a lot of progression volume to get there and feel successful. Plus a lot of strength underneath that too, that they're going to build over those 12 weeks. And I think you loosely or maybe firmly committed to giving it a shot.
I'm doing it. I'm very excited to do it because, and we even talked about this when I initially had signed up for the high rocks. I was like, dude, like, where's the program for this? Man? Like where, I was like, what do you like, build one, dude.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even find out from you. I found out from Lindsay.
Oh, nice.
Lindsay was like on my team. Lindsay was like, yeah, and I was speaking to Marcus, and he's launching this sort of like hybrid, potentially like high rocks focused program. I was like, no, he didn't. And so now I'm gonna Monday when you launch that thing, I'm going to kick it on for 12 weeks. And that's kind of perfect for me because I was supposed to do a High Rocks in November. But this gut stuff that I found out about sort of pushed back on me a little bit.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I also just want to say about this world of movement that we, love and live in. A setback is okay. Finding out that you have, being injured and, having to take some time off, you can adapt and you can figure other things out as well. But it's at first, especially if it's a mental, for me, really, I think fitness has become far more a mental health action in my life. Mm-hmm. What it does for me mentally, absolutely outweighs what it does for me physically. Mm-hmm. And so that is hard to swallow at times, but I also think actually a really good exercise of challenge for someone like you or I, or probably many of the people that listen to this podcast. Like, what does it feel like to pause for, some time and let your body heal and you have an injury, like actually take the time off. Because guess what? If this is the lifestyle that you've chosen to live, this isn't like there's no there's no end date to it. There's no dedeline to it. This is like, this is what you do.
Yeah. I believe a lot of people can get, when they encounter some of their first setbacks in fitness, it brings up a lot of fear of like, am I going to come back to this thing? Can I come back to it? And then will I want to, or will all this discipline and motivation that I've built go away? And they can remember back to when they were not super active and they're like, I don't want to go back to that person. And after you've encountered a couple setbacks and you return, you can potentially get to a place in your life where you're like, oh yeah, setbacks happen and I'll be back. It's just a matter of time. And you start to appreciate that the setbacks are not about physical regression. It's about your mental well-being. Takes a step back and you're like, damn, I value so much being able to get up and move each day because of what it does for me mentally more than physically. And that's going to inform my decisions about how I approach fitness in the future, because getting that 275 pound power clean is not worth the next 6 weeks where I couldn't do what I want to do, and I was down in the dumps in my head, and I wasn't showing up as good as I could as a dad or as a husband or as a friend or as a business owner. And that is really what fundamentally shifted for me after my competitive CrossFit career. Was I had so many, and this was before I had the list of responsibilities I have now in life, but I had so many days, injuries, months that were just, I was at 50% of who I could be as a person because of the physical setbacks I was having in fitness that impacted me mentally and emotionally. And I just knew I just didn't want to do that anymore. And I spent the next 3 or 4 years after CrossFit ended searching for like, what is the expression of my fitness going to look like so that I can scratch the itch of pushing myself without introducing the level of like risk of setback that I had when I was a competitive CrossFit athlete. And there's no such thing as a movement practice that's going to be rewarding physically that doesn't have risk to it. But we can mitigate those risks. And I think you mentioned it when you're like, I don't think you can get hurt doing persist. And sure, put in the hands of the wrong person, anybody can hurt themselves doing dumb, stupid stuff. But it's like, what is a fitness method or approach that allows you to challenge yourself as safely as possible and controls for some of the variables that we can control for, where you don't have to unnecessarily, assume risk. And I think that is, it puts a ceiling on how much you can physically accomplish potentially. If you really want to be a world champion, you got to take more risk. But, at 40 and 44, running businesses, having families, it's a lot of the audience that listens to this. It's like, we're driven by the fullness of so many parts of life. And, that extra 5 pounds grabbing the 80-pound dumbbells instead of the 70-pound dumbbells, could I do it? Sure. Does it increase the likelihood that my shoulder's going to feel really crappy and I'm going to have a bad night's sleep for a week? It sure does. So I'm just not doing it.
I couldn't agree more with you, man. Like the conversations that I've really been having internally, I never thought, I mean, I said it to you earlier on today when we were training, like I just never thought that I would just truly give up conventional deadlift or back squat because I love the movement so much.
Yeah.
I love getting under the bar. I love the fear that those two movements induce in me. I love being able to challenge myself, but I also love my children, my wife, and my Saturday mornings with them, and coaching soccer, and going skiing in the wintertime with them.
Yeah.
And I know that like is a heavy deadlift or back squat at my age, and look, it's the truth, right? Like I don't know how much age has to do with it, but I do know that like, probably whatever it's been, 10, 12 years of really pushing my body to the absolute max with strength training, forgetting about all the Muay Thai and the other stuff. Yeah. My back is like, dude, I'm going to let you know.
Yeah.
You don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so
it takes a lot of humility and also just an appreciation for more that life has to offer to acknowledge that. And, that's where you're at now. And in 5 years, it might be different, but it's a journey we're on. And so
that's true.
You don't know. I never write anything off.
Never say never.
But I appreciate you sharing so much about your story in both of these past two episodes. I think a lot of people can connect to this journey of setbacks and then coming back. And you've had a whole lot of setbacks in your life, and you keep coming back stronger and learning things about yourself, which I think is it's a great model of how to approach it. It's like come away with something that makes you better for the future. So I appreciate you again. How do you want people to find you out there in the world and connect with you if they want to reach out?
Yep. At Michael Chernow everywhere and anywhere that you would be looking for that kind of thing. And creaturesofhabit.com, creatures with a K, Creatures of Habit on socials. Those are the easiest places. And, I think just the last thing I would just say in all of this is what it's boiled down to for me is that there's only one thing we've kind of got to do as close to perfectly as possible in our lives, and that's just get back up. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that's the only one thing that I have 100% absolutely committed to is just to get back up, because we're all going to fail. We're all going to fall short. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have character defects. We're all going to, have self-doubt, insecurity, fear, all those things. No one's unique there. We all have that stuff. And the only thing that separates, from my opinion, the good from the potentially great is the ability to get back up.
It's a beautiful final message. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next week.